Hello and welcome to another episode of Veterans to Success, the podcast where I get to chat with seemingly ordinary people with extraordinary stories. And today I've got with me JJ Hardy. Hi, JJ. Thanks for joining me today. How are you doing?
Oh, I'm doing exceptionally well, Joe. Thank you for having me on your show. This is an honor. Thank you.
No, my pleasure, and it's an honor to have you on the show too. And I know we're going to do, I'm going to be coming on your podcast as well, which we're going to be talking about a bit later. So, you know the score, as we've talked about, there's no fanfare for the common man or woman. We just dive straight in, and because this is all about you, really. I just ask the questions and I interact when I think I've got something that can give value or add value. So, tell me about your time before the military. You know, let's go back to when you were a wee boy, a small lad. What was going on? What was going on in your life?
Well, you know what I like to try to highlight when I talk to people like you and when I get on stage and I tell my story is really that I was really very normal. However, I came from a very rough background where my parents didn't really have a whole lot of money. There were a lot of gangs in the area that I grew up in. And, you know, we just kind of lived in poverty, sometimes paycheck to paycheck, wondering where we're going to get our next meal. And I'll be honest with you, an environment like that can be very verbally and physically abusive because there are just a lot of stressors. So I mean, eventually I wanted to get away from that, right? I mean, I'd been homeless at one point because I got kicked out of my house at 16 years old and you know, tried to figure out where I was going to be getting my next meals and living out of my pickup truck and just kind of living life a little bit harder than I probably needed to, but it felt right at the time. But yeah, that's just kind of what my childhood was like.
And like you touched on the fact that it was pretty tough at times. Was that? I mean, you know that sometimes the the cards were dealt. That's just the way it goes. But it can be maybe made worse by your peer group, the kids that you're knocking around with. I mean, how did the relationships with the children at school go and the teachers?
So my parents smoked in the house, and a lot of times I was picked on because I was the guy that had the secondhand clothing that smelled like cigarette smoke. That, by the way, I didn't even understand what that smell meant because I lived in it every day.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
that was kind of tough. Other than that, though, locally, the kids that I lived with, I kind of had to, interestingly, if I kind of had to learn how to fight at a very young age and deal with a lot of adversity even outside of my house because the people that were surrounding us, they some of them were really really great, but then it was like the complete polar opposite with everybody else, and so the good people tried to keep to themselves, which I tried to be one of the good people. And then the other people, they were always trying to take something from somebody. And that's a very interesting dynamic to live in because you kind of have to figure out how to make your way and you can't avoid all of that all the time. And so you kind of get wrapped up in it from time to time.
Yeah. And I mean, for those for you listening, right, and you probably guessed that JJ is not from the UK. You're
I'm
from
not.
No, you're from the States, United States
Yes.
of America. Whereabouts in the States do you hail from, JJ?
So we lived in Texas for a little while, but primarily we lived in a part of Iowa City that was low income in Iowa. So in the Midwest.
Okay. And so what was the point, right, when in your life where you thought, you know what, this living in pickups, this getting into trouble, maybe knocking about with the wrong crowd and having some issues. What was the point where you thought,
Well, first of all, I always looked at my parents, and though they did their best, I feel I knew there was always a better way. I guess the best way to say that is that I moved on and I figured out another way because right across the street from my grandmother's house was a recruiter who said he could help me. And I mean, it wasn't just the poverty, right? It was I was starting to get into drugs as I got older. You know, we as we become teenage young men, we tend to not really put up with that stuff too much anymore, both in the house and at school and everywhere else. I was becoming a more violent person. and I really didn't appreciate it. And so my grandmother's neighbor was an Army recruiter, and
Right.
he said, this is an option for you. You can not only get out of this, but you can go to an environment that's potentially more supportive than what you're dealing with right now. Maybe not, but you might get lucky. And so I said my chances are slightly over 50-50, so I might as well give it a shot. And I did.
And that's an interesting formula, over 50-50, like, because a military formula is, oh well, we got 60-40 chance, let's go for it, let's
Yeah.
see, let's see what we can get. So you'd already learned that at a young age, right? Before
Yep.
you
Yep.
got in the military. And so how old were you at this point in your life?
So I went and took the ASVAB when it was like it was about 2 months before my 18th birthday. And then I signed up for the military just after my 18th birthday. Uh, I had to get out of high school early because I was doing some violent stuff in high school. So I joined the military before my regular graduation date would have been, because I had a general education diploma, and moved on from there. And since then, that all the opportunities came my way because I could get college and the whole 9 yards. So
Yeah. And I don't know about you. I look back at my education, and for one reason or another, I missed a year at school through an incident that took me out at a very critical point before that was my penultimate year, so just before exams. So my academic my academic year, when I left, or my academia, wasn't that great. And when I joined the military, that's when I started to learn, because when they give you the pamphlet on the semi-automatic weapon, and they say, if you let a round go when you're not supposed to, you're going to jail, bud. And I found that was a real eye opener to education. How did
yeah.
that affect you?
So joining the military, I actually thought was great. Basic training, first of all, was not bad at all to me. I mean, I kind of had a rough environment that I was growing up in already. And so to have somebody screaming at me to go through and put rounds down range and all that stuff. I hunted already, and honestly, there was a little bit of gang violence where I came from too. So that was nothing that was out of the norm. I wasn't putting the rounds down range at home, but other people were. And so that stuff wasn't so bad.
Yeah.
But what I found when I got out of the military, or not out of the military, but out of basic training in AIT, my actual job skill training, is that I was surrounded by people that actually cared about me as a human being and wanted to help me develop and grow and become better. And they started teaching me these leadership principles that, I mean, I didn't know what that was back at home. I just knew that, survival was it. And so when they started teaching me these things, they not only taught them, but they explained the importance of it, because at some point we were going to have to rely on the person to our left and right. And I did do 3 combat deployments. So eventually I learned how important that was and really implemented that.
Thank you. You mentioned a mnemonic or an acronym of AIT. What's that?
So that's the advanced individual training. So I mean, you go through basic training in the Army and you're automatically considered a soldier, but then you have a job specific skill that you learn, which
Right. Okay. Yeah.
I worked in transportation logistics, and I was a manager, even though I'll tell you what, my first combat deployment, I was carrying a saw and sitting in the turret of a 5-ton truck and putting rounds down range. So I'm not sure how transportation management really fit into that, but I just did what I did because they put me where they put me.
Well, you were certainly managing the traffic flow, putting.
Sometimes.
So, yes. So you've gone through this advanced individual training then, and your career then is earmarked for logistics, transportation management. And how did you find that? And how did that fit in with what you wanted out of life?
Honestly, I didn't really want to do that. So oddly enough, my goal was to go into the military and kind of learn something different. And I was really good at what I did. But it took a lot of years to get to that point. I mean, isn't that the way it works for everything you
Yeah.
do? But what I did learn from that is really how to do um, a lot of analysis. And when you're in the logistics world, analysis is very important. I mean,
Yeah,
you're analyzing how much cargo you can fit in an area. You need to figure out how to balance an aircraft. You need to learn how to balance a ship when you're loading it. You need to do all kinds of things with math and analysis and all kinds of stuff. And so you learn all of these things. And then as I got older in my career, it was kind of cool because I was this senior guy. And so all of these other people, whenever they had to go somewhere, about 6 to 8 months prior, I was helping them figure that out and help them develop training plans and the whole 9 yards. And so, they don't want to fit that stuff into their training schedule because if they're an infantry unit, they want to put rounds down range. They don't want to put people through driver's training to be able to load stuff on a ship.
yeah,
If they're in an aviation unit, they want to go and fly and learn how to do landing zones and stuff like that. They don't want to fit driver's training and a bunch of other stuff into their schedule that's not necessary
yeah.
until they get really close to it. So you have to do a lot of thinking for other people and find the gaps
Yeah.
in where everything is. And it was really fun.
And that's interesting because I mean, talking about loading stuff, I remember when I first got posted to Germany from the UK and learning how to get all your kit into the back of a car, like
Oh gosh.
and I mean what you're doing is just 100 times that. The point I'm making, I suppose, is that when you mention military, like Army, Navy, or Air Force to civilians, they just think of one particular aspect. Like I was in the engineers, like we'll build bridges, we do
Yep.
water points, we do minefield beaches, we do all sorts of stuff to keep the battle group going and get them through over rivers, through minefields, make sure they've got enough water. And it's where we all come together, isn't it? Because you as logistics, transportation management, you make sure we've got all the stuff. Because you know what? If there's not a bridge there, we can't build it.
Yep.
And if we haven't got mines there, we can't develop a minefield or water points. So it's all interesting and vitally important how it interacts with each other, isn't it?
Yes. Well, and I'll take it one step past that. So every branch of the military is designed to be its own self-sustaining element. And so your entire career, what you learn is, because it's a business, it really is.
Yeah, yeah.
It's just a really weird type of business because I'm not even going to go into all that, but the Army, the branch that I was in, we were designed that if we had to go somewhere, we had people that specialized in ammo, we had people that specialized in driving trucks, we had people that specialized in figuring out what requirements you had to take with you, and then we also had helicopters and we actually have ships in the Army and the whole 9 yards. So each branch is designed to take itself where it needs to go and set up and be its own life element. And that's a really unique thing because not many businesses well, I was going to say the United States, but I guess the entire world. I don't think there are many business models that operate that way.
No, but it's the most self-sustaining and practical business I think that there is really.
Yes.
So what happened once you did that? Because I mean, you went up through the ranks and you had, because I've read your CV and you've had quite a remarkable career.
Well, thank you.
And so what did you get up to? Where did you get to? And I mean, I know you were deployed 3 times to
Iraq.
conflict area.
Yep.
Yeah, Iraq.
Conflict.
Thank you. I wasn't going to say where, but yeah, Iraq.
Yeah. Well, I won't tell you where in Iraq, but I definitely did go to that specific country.
and how was that? What was the morale like? What did you find challenging? What did you find rewarding? And what was the overall experience?
So, deployment and not deployment, those are two completely different stories in themselves. And actually, people think of deployment as this putting rounds down range, you're always getting shot at, being blown up, and you see a lot of really, really bad things all the time. But honestly speaking, that's not really the case. And so what I will say about deployment is that a lot of the rules that apply when you're at home station, the gloves kind of come off and they let you do your job when you're deployed. And so actually the experience for the person who's out there doing the work, it's actually more enjoyable. And now there are the tough things that come up, right? You know, you can't avoid that stuff when you're downrange. However, well, some people do, but you know, I definitely didn't. A lot of people that I worked with definitely did not. But those things, that sticks with you, but it doesn't destroy the morale there. It'll destroy it for a little while, kind of like when you have a death in the family.
Yeah.
You feel down and out for a few days, but it doesn't completely take you out of the game because you know the game is still there to be played. And so you gotta get your mind in there and stay in there. But when you're not deployed, it's really cool because you get all these educational opportunities. You get to travel around and help people that you've never met before on missions that aren't necessarily on your team. As you move up in rank, you get to participate in a lot of planning stuff and you know, network and really make these cool connections. And the military is different than the civilian workforce in that you're kind of a family. You know, some people you'd be hesitant to walk in front of if something really, really bad happened, just personality wise. But the mentality is there that no matter what, if they're wearing the uniform, you're going to do what you got to do to help them out because they inherently have taken the oath to do the same thing for you. And so at the end of the day, when push comes to shove, these people are your detached family.
Yeah. And I always like the Friday afternoon, so long as we weren't out in the field or doing something, in the squadron bar on Friday afternoon, right? If you had a problem, right, you could bring it out in the squadron bar and just have a chat. No rank removed, and just have a chat, and then it was gone. Monday morning, it was gone, fresh start, no problems, and then you brought it out. Whereas I find that, like, sometimes in civilian street, there can be backstabbing, I suppose, for want of a better word, and people let things build up because they want to be so PC now. You can't, in my opinion, I've seen things escalate out of proportion when really, if they just had said, look, this is how I feel about this particular situation, let's have a chat about it and resolve it. Because in the military, right, we can't afford to hold grudges because, you know, as you were saying before, you want to be watching out for the man or woman on your left and right and them doing it the same for you. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does make sense. And you know, I've noticed in the civilian workforce that a lot of people, the reason that they act certain ways is I think they're kind of really dependent on having the income that comes from that job. In the military, we know that we get paid on the 1st and the 15th, and now we're just there to do our job. Now,
oh,
if
you
something
get
takes
paid
us out of the game,
twice. You get paid twice.
well, you can choose. You can choose to get paid once a month or twice a month. But
okay.
that's what we always said. You get paid on the 1st and the 15th, so you don't have to worry about money. So you need to show up on Monday morning and keep doing your job until it's time to go home on Friday. But and then sometimes the weekend comes into play too. It's a unique situation. But in the civilian workforce, it's very easy to lose your job.
Yeah.
I mean, unless you work in a government position, you can easily get fired from your job. That's not something you typically have to worry about unless you get injured or you might have some legal trouble or something like that in the military. Now, civilians act a certain way because they're worried about that, and so sometimes they'll keep things close to the chest when they should be spreading the knowledge and the wealth and the morale around to everybody else in the organization. But how can you do that all the time when you are constantly in fear of losing your job? And that's why I think that you and me and everybody else who has served, even whether a little bit or a lot of time, we have that unique experience where we can talk about leadership in that, you know, you can't keep stuff close to the chest. You know, at some point you're going to want to leave that position, maybe for career advancement or maybe for whatever reason. Maybe you get fired and you have to go somewhere else, but then that next person needs to pick up and take that job and be able to run with it. Or if they don't hire somebody, then maybe somebody else is going to have to do that. So it's very important to not make yourself needed. It's always good to make yourself redundant because you never know when something's going to change.
And when you've made yourself redundant, it shows you've made a good job, because I believe that, and I'm sure you've got something, a belief similar, that a good leader is someone who can get somebody else to do something they would not have done had you not been there.
Correct. Well, and the reason that they do it while you're there is it's not because of the company. It's not because of the training. It's because of the person that they work for. People don't leave jobs. They leave the people that they work for.
Yeah.
And so if you think of it that way, say they decide to get rid of you after you did all these great things, form this great team, and have all of these efficiencies built in. If they take the leader of that team out of the equation forcefully, then that team is now probably, maybe, who knows what their mentality is, but the idea is that they're going to probably stop performing at the same rate that they were because they lost their leadership. They lost that person that was the glue that held everybody together.
Yeah, exactly. And what was your most memorable time in the military? What was your success, do you think?
My most memorable time is probably when I pinned my stripes. I was scared. I was nervous. I was not confident yet, to be honest with you. And so it was probably the most confusing but most rewarding time. And then they took a group of people and they said, these people are yours.
Yeah,
Now,
I
I
remember
may
that
have
one.
passed I may have passed with a study guide on all those promotion boards and stuff like that, but up here I really wasn't ready for that. I was just like, yeah, let's get that promotion. But that was probably the most influential time in my career because I almost got fired because I wasn't ready. And
Yeah.
so that from that moment on for the next 6 months, there was actually a time in there where somebody told me, hey, if you don't start stepping up and taking charge of your team and showing leadership, then you can go back to the rank that you were, and we can take your team away from you. Oh, pardon me. And
Okay.
and I was not happy about that. And so he gave me the option to shadow him and to follow him and learn how he did things on a day-to-day basis. And it was probably the best thing I ever did because I interacted with senior leaders and I saw the why behind everything that he was telling us to do. And so I slowly started molding certain things into my activities. And I noticed that my team came together because of it. I started being appreciated by not only my seniors and my soldiers that worked under me, but also my peers. Once you create a good team, people look at you and they're like, how did you do that?
Yeah.
And they want to emulate the things that you're doing. And so that's how you change a company culture and all those sort of things. But that's probably where my most memorable time was when I got that promotion, because it was scary and I almost got fired.
And I know exactly where you're coming from, because I remember when I got my first promotion, and then all of a sudden they're saying, right, this is your task, and you've got 8 men under your control. I thought, oh wow, yeah. And it was interesting because what had happened, we were going for a demolitions day, right? And we've got something in the UK down by London, which is the Dartford Tunnel, and it goes under the Thames, right, to get from Kent to Essex. And we were going on a demolitions day in towards the north, so we had to go through the Dartford Tunnel. And a staff sergeant who will remain nameless, I was a lance corporal at the time, and we were sat in the back of the trucks, right? And on one of the trucks was all the explosives we were taking, and we go through the Dartford Tunnel, and for some reason, I don't know what it was, but we got an inspection on the other side, and they found the explosives, right? Which it hadn't been reported that we were going through with all these explosives, PE4. I don't know what happened.
No.
But what was even worse was all the detonators were in the same truck. And you'll appreciate that. They hadn't even been put in a separate truck. And like if the Dartford Tunnel came down, that would have been it. That would have been carnage. And
Oh, Horrible.
what happened? We had to eat. Well, the seniors and all the hierarchy had to eat humble pie, and they brought the hierarchy, all the executives of the Dartford Tunnel. This was back in the 80s, and I was in charge of 8 men, and we had to build a bridge, MGB, medium girder bridge, where it all goes together like Meccano, all pieces.
Yep.
And we had to do a speed build in front of these executives, and they said, Cortland O'Connor, you're in charge, make sure nothing goes wrong. And I thought, wow. Fortunate. Yeah, well, yeah, I felt crap. Wow, if I mess up here, I'm supposed to I've got to impress him. If I make one boo-boo and drop the ball, I'm going to jail. And that really put the pressure on me, mate, I'll tell you. Fortunately, it all went well. And you know what? You know what was really rewarding as well? The 8 men I had in my charge could build that bridge with their eyes closed. Anyway, all I had to do was make sure everything went together at the right time and the men were safe. That was my job, because now I'm at manager level, and you'll understand this, because you've got to take yourself away from the tools and watch what's going on. And of course, I was in charge of saying, right, ready, hands on, boom the bridge, and at those points. But everyone else, they were just flying around, knowing exactly what they had to do. And I think that was my first venture into real leadership, and knowing that it was down to me.
Yeah, and you brought up a really good point. One of the key things that you always have to think about when you're in a leadership position is that you are not the one who makes that situation successful. The people do. So you should only really inject yourself when there's a struggle or they ask for help. The most important part is to actually sit back and kind of observe. And now you can't do that forever. There's got to be balance there. So injecting figuring out where to inject yourself when needed. And really, there's no good, bad, right or wrong way to do it. Your people will tell you when you're starting to annoy the crap out of them and get in their business. But otherwise, taking that step back and being able to observe the battlefield and get yourself in where you fit in is really the most important part.
And that's another point about sometimes you just need to know when to put your arm around them and say, come on, whether that be male, female, or give them a swift size 10 up the jack seat and say, come on, get to grips, bud.
Some people need that.
Yeah. And also saying, look, come here, I'll show you how to do it. Now you do it, and you've cracked it. So, does that make sense? So now you've discovered leadership and you're flying up the ranks. Because now I'd like to just touch on the coaching and mentoring, because there is a difference. And I mean, you touched on it before as well. You were taught by some great people, and you were allowed to shadow someone just before you got bust, or if you didn't shadow him correctly, you were going to get bust. So how important was that to your military career, and what difference did it make?
Well, so it taught me one thing, and that's that no matter what level I was working, so I got many promotions, right? I mean, if you stay in for a certain amount of time, of course you will, or else they're going to kick you out for not making rank. But, you have to know that whenever you take a new position that you need to take a step back and see how things are going and manage what's already happening before you start stepping in and trying to make changes, and you got to know when to do that. I would say the magic number of days is always 90, but that varies on, how well things are going and if the things really start needing to have some change. But, shadowing somebody is always good. The military forces that. I mean, when you go down range, you take over for another unit. And so what happens is you have what they call a left seat, right seat ride. So they really do a good job of making sure that when there's that battlefield changeover, that you go in, sit next to somebody. That left seat is when you're watching, you're observing, you're not really doing yet. You're just kind of asking questions and seeing how operations are currently going. That right seat, now that's when things change. Now that's when they sit and watch you while you're driving everything, and you're making things happen the way that you've been taught, and starting to set up your own things while they're helping you make that transition. Honestly, there might be a week that you're watching them, and there's supposed to be a week that they watch you, but realistically, it's always like 2 or 3 days, because then they're like, I'm going home, so I don't want to be here anymore. But at the end of the day, that left seat, right seat is always very, very important. And I think people should understand that even when they go into a new organization, there should be that time where you just, even if you're the expert, maybe you know more than the people that are already there, and you can make changes immediately after you get there. You need to learn what's happening before you really get too involved.
Yeah. And you've just reminded me of something which I've never brought up before now. I think because I don't think we've ever mentioned an age, but that time when I was in charge of building that bridge, I was 23, right, which is pretty young. I mean,
Yep.
and the impact of that going wrong was massive, right? I'm a 23-year-old young man, and I'm not sure that in Civilian Street we're able sometimes to let the reins go and trust younger people, and I think it's important. We should, shouldn't we?
Yes. Yes, we should. And I like how you said that, Civilian Street, but I was trying not to laugh when you said it.
Yeah.
But no, it is important. I mean, any time that you take over something new, there's always a learning opportunity. It doesn't matter if you're building a bridge, you always have to take it in stride. And I think that led me to another thought. That's one thing that the military does really well, that I carry over into my business that I have today, and I've used at all the places I've worked, is that they're constantly trying to figure out how to make things better. Not every company does that. Some companies you go into, they're like, we've done this for 30 years. Why would we change this?
Yeah.
Things aren't the same as it was 30 years ago. But the military almost forces that, right?
Yeah.
Where they take an operation, and as soon as you're done, they have that after action review where you have a discussion around what went right, what went wrong, what to improve, what to get rid of for next time, and try to always make things better. And that's good, because it teaches you that even yourself, when you're doing something, say you're going on a vacation, right? And there are a bunch of speed bumps along the way. Well, after that vacation is done, if you sit back and have a family discussion about it and figure out what went right and what went wrong, that can be used in everything. Whether it's individually with your family, it can be with a group of people that you're volunteering with. It doesn't matter. It's universal. And that's a skill that I think that I've taken away, that you probably have taken away as well.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, like, you've probably heard the term neuro-linguistic programming, NLP.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, the military have been using that for hundreds of years. It's just that Bandler and Grinder gave it a name, NLP. But what NLP and right, because I know you know a lot about it. I'm trained in it to a high level, and the more I look at it, the more I think, wow, when I did basic training, that was NLP.
Yes, it was.
It was totally on jump how high. He didn't ask why, none of that. Just automatic. And it's about, and when you can get yourself doing the good stuff automatically, continuously and consistently, that can really make the difference. Because I know you do a great coaching program, and that's what it's about, isn't it? Getting individuals, going back to getting someone to do what they wouldn't have done had you not been there,
Yes.
and doing it consistently and the right thing. So what talking about that, I mean, the opposite of success is failure. So what do you do, and how did you deal with failure in the military, and how do you deal with failure now? What do you do?
Well, it definitely matters what you failed in, first of all, but because there could be catastrophic, and then there could be day-to-day stuff. I honestly truly believe that there is failure in everything that you do. You can have a successful client meeting, but somewhere in there you did something wrong. And you never know what that is until you sit back and look at it. So failure, the word fail there's an acronym that goes with that, and that's your first attempt in learning.
That's right. Yeah.
I mean, we started off as babies, right? We couldn't even walk. We couldn't even talk. So when we started learning how to walk, we got up, we fell down, we got up, we fell down, and eventually we took a step or two, and then we fell on our butt again. And I mean, that's kind of a lesson in life, because eventually we learn how to walk.
Yeah.
But if you look at failure as something that is just something you can't recover from, then it doesn't really add up to anything. And it's not really true either,
Mm,
because there you can always bounce back from anything you do.
yeah.
Even if you get your legs blown off, you can still figure out how to go and do construction work. I know, I've seen people do it. So
Yeah. 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 Me too.
there's nothing that keeps you from meeting any specific goal that you have. Really, it's all in here,
Yeah, definitely. And all in here being in the mind.
in the
And
mind. Yes.
yeah, yeah. And that's an interesting point, because failure is okay. And I believe that you haven't failed unless you give up. Because going back to that analogy of being a child, where when you you didn't just give up and then stop, not walk for the rest of your life. You thought,
Right.
I'm going to do this. I'm going to get this, because I'm going to grow into the person I need to be able to do this task or mission or whatever. And I say to people, it's absolutely okay to set impossible goals, right? Because then you got to figure out who you got to be to achieve that goal.
Yes.
Because that goal is only impossible in a normal mind, right? And I love being abnormal. I'm not sure about you, but I love it.
Oh, I love being abnormal. People
Yeah.
look at me like I'm crazy all the time. I'm like, why in the hell are you giving, pardon my language, why the heck are you giving up? And they're like, what are you talking about? That was horrible that just happened right there. And I'm like, okay, so how are you going to do it differently next time?
Yeah.
What are you talking about? I'm not doing that again. But that's the typical mindset. The military mindset is not that way at all. The
No.
military mindset is, you know what? We got halfway up the hill. We almost lost a couple guys. We regrouped. We made another plan, and then we stormed that son of a gun the next
Right.
time.
Yeah.
And you can't give up, because if you give up, you're not giving up on the mission. You're giving up on yourself. And
Exactly.
the only difference between when you're a child and when you're an adult is that when you're learning how to walk, you have somebody going, come here, come on, you're doing a good job.
Yeah.
But when
Yeah.
you're an adult, you have people saying, you can't do that. So now you have to find your own internal motivation to get past that.
Yeah. And make sure that you knock about, hang around with the right people. Right.
Correct. Yes, your inner circle is very important. I had that talk with my kids, because I have a 17-year-old and a 14-year-old. And I'll tell you what, sometimes the type of people that they surround themselves with, I just look at them and I'm like, you know what? Your friends are great, but can you see yourself being like your friends? Oh, I would never be like them. Okay, well then why is it that these are the type of people that you hang around? And the only reason I say that is because if you want to be successful, you got to surround yourself with the people that you want to be like, not necessarily the people that you used to be like when you were 16, 17, 25 years old.
Yeah. And I've said it before, and I'll say it here, and I know I'll say it again, but I don't want to be the smartest person in the room.
No, you need a different room.
Yeah.
You need a room that you can elevate yourself to, and not a
I,
room that you are already over elevated.
yeah. And even when I'm running a mastermind group, right? I am just the same as when I was in charge of the guys who were building the bridge and many of the military tasks I did now in business. But even when I'm running a mastermind and I bring master minds of their own particular field together, I'm the facilitator, right? I know what I've got to do to get the most out of them as a group. But the fact is that they're all masters in their own field. So bringing that together, the growth is just exponential, right?
Mm.
And how it works. So, and on that aspect of it, I know, how did your transition from the military go to Civvy Street?
So, that's interesting that you went straight to that, because we just got done talking about this mindset of having to succeed. But I will tell you that when I first got out of the military, it was a very rocky journey. The one thing I will say about people that serve in the military or the police force, or maybe spend a lot of years in the fire department, is we kind of have an identity that's associated with what we were doing. And I thought the grass was going to be super green on the other side when I transitioned
Oh
from the
yeah,
military.
they're just lovely color green, everything green. Yeah.
But I'll be honest with you, for about a year to 18 months, the grass was not green.
Yeah.
It was horrible actually. So I started slipping into a bit of a depression because I would apply for jobs. I would do all the things that they told us in our transition assistance program that we should do. And I probably applied to like 1,000 jobs and got 990 rejection letters and maybe 10 interviews. And so eventually I had to go for something a little bit. I had to take myself and put myself in a lower position. And I
Yeah.
stuttered when I said that because that was very hard.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
That was very hard. And but that was only a temporary step to get myself where I needed to be. And so I eventually had a couple other jobs that were pretty good, but it was not an easy journey.
And you've just triggered something in my head. Cheers for that, JJ. I remember when after coming towards the end of my first posting, my troop commander got posted to the Falklands, and before he went, I said, "Look, sir, could you give me my confidential so I can get promoted?" He said, "Oh, you don't need that. We'll promote you out in the Falklands. You'll be okay." He left, and then I said, "I think I'm getting posted. I'm not going to the Falklands." He said, "Yeah, you are." Anyway, Records sent me a posting back to the UK, so I never went there. And I've been out earning my stripes, if you like, for 3 years. And then because I didn't get posted, I went to a holding unit to learn my trade, and you don't get promoted there. And they didn't know me. So what that did is knock me back for 2 years on my promotion, career progression, which was, it was not good. And I suppose then I had to prove myself again. And I suppose that was like you being on Civvy Street, I suppose. You thought you were going for your promotion because maybe your CV did not reflect actually what you could do
Correct.
in Civvy terms. So they underestimate what you could do when you probably could have done the job with your eyes closed and one arm behind your back.
A lot of times, yes. I mean, I have not had a job, and I worked, probably shouldn't advertise this, but I worked the 3 jobs that you see when you go to my profile, but I also did some under the table stuff where I help people, family farms and different things like that. And there was nothing that I did that was difficult, even though, and this is what I thought when I was filling out those job applications, that some of these things I was applying for, that I ended up applying for, I thought they were these extravagant things.
Yeah.
Well, they may teach you how to put your stuff in a resume format as you're transitioning from the military, but they don't teach you how to read a job posting. They don't tell you what that stuff means. And all of that, they just put a bunch of fancy jargon in there. And really all it amounts to most of the time is sitting there staring at reports. And that's something that most of us that were senior people in the military could do with our eyes closed. Well, you have to have your eyes open to read the reports, but it's easy.
Yeah. I get what you mean. Yeah.
Yeah, but they just don't do a great job teaching you the differences on your way out. And so, of course, as a senior military member, I ended up having to go through a few workshops and seminars, and then I would go to the different workforce development centers and talk to HR people on my own. And I had to teach myself how to network outside of the military to learn all of these things so that eventually I could land that job. And then eventually I could, when I hated that job, because I did for that first one, to get another job and then get another job, which that was over the course of like 5 years. So it wasn't like just jumping from job to job, but it's a skill that you need to learn, because in today's age, there are a lot of positions that are out there that really don't have promotion potential. So you're gonna want to go to another job at some point, which for somebody transitioning from the military is a tough pill to swallow. Because like for me, I spent almost 2 decades wearing the uniform. To jump from job to jobs just so I could make more money and start improving my resume was not something that I was used to.
Mm.
If they wanted me to go somewhere else, they would put me on orders.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And that's an important point, because I think that depending on how long you spend in the military, I did 7.5 in the regs and 7.5 in the TA. And actually, I suppose, and I think I've mentioned this to you before, I'm unemployable now by a standard traditional company, unless they want someone who works and thinks outside the box, because I've run my own business now for 36, 37 years. And I'm not saying, by the way, that I'm not good. It's just that what I am saying is that I'm an entrepreneur and I like to do things my way, if that makes sense, and for the greater good, right? Whereas when I was employed with some companies when I left the military, I could see that there was so much backbiting going on, and it was important, and it was an important pill to swallow, which you discovered, because you just got to be able to say, this isn't working for me. I've got to go because it's killing me, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Well, there are a lot of things that you know we that I was discussing earlier on that I learned when I was in the military, and really the basics of it all is that you have to truly care about the people that you work with. At some point, you know, you may not be putting rounds down range and pulling people out of fires and stuff like that at work, but you are putting out, you know, figurative fires in a job, and you still need to be able to trust people, and you still need to be able to have that level of influence for them to be able to trust you. And so I think what a lot of corporations are missing is that element of you know, making yourself making your not necessarily redundant like we talked about earlier, but putting yourself in a position where you are needed but not needed by everybody.
Yeah. And you know what you're doing now, since you've been out, you're starting to build strong social networks and business networks. How important do you think that is for you, and also guys getting out of the military, or maybe guys who are out of the military and maybe stuck?
Oh my gosh. So I've recently started doing some additional stuff with helping people through transitions. But even when I had just my leadership training and coaching that I was doing, you know, I really didn't have any success until I just met as many people as I could. Uh, to be honest with you, think of Facebook. When you put a post out there and somebody likes it, then they'll share it, and then another person sees it, and then their network sees it, and then 5 people from their network share it, and so on and so forth, and then it becomes exponential at some point, right? Well, think of building your network the same way. If you go out and meet a couple of good people at a networking event, and you may not even know what your service is going to be yet, or maybe you're just looking for a job, but those people like you for you without even knowing what you're trying to do there, then they're still going to tell somebody else about you, and you'll get an introduction, and you'll start, whether you drink coffee when you start or not, you'll probably be an addict by the time you get 5 months into this networking process, because everybody wants to take you for coffee. But you know, you just meet so many wonderful people, and eventually when you figure out what your offering is going to be, because it took me a little while to figure out what my offering was going to be, then as soon as you tell one person, or you send an email out to the people that you've already connected with, well, now they're like, oh, well, gosh, JJ is great. I'm absolutely going to figure out somebody for him to work with. Or if you're looking for a job, oh my gosh, well, JJ is great. So I have to find a place for him to work. And so why is building a network important? Because if you don't know anybody, and you're just relying on going on Indeed and applying, or LinkedIn, or whatever the case may be, and applying for jobs, and none of those people know you before you apply for those jobs, then you're just another resume that they flip through. But if you network with the right people, and somebody sees your proposal or your resume when it comes across their desk for review, then they're going to be like, oh, well, gosh, I know him. They're going to put your resume automatically off to the side, and you're going to be one of the ones that's instantly considered, just because they know who you are. They
Yeah.
know how hard you are trying already to put yourself out there.
And also, I mean, because it's interesting. I was having a one-to-one with someone today, and I think that because what you've just reminded me of is I use the formula: two ears, one mouth.
Oh yeah.
Right. So because we've had a two-way street in this conversation all the way. I ask the question and then I just shut up and I listen to them because they're telling me their life story, so I should pay them some respect and
Yes.
allow them to tell me. And then if it's a two-way street, I tell them. And I think that it's important, right? You don't start off with saying, "Oh, hi, my name is ABC, and I sell this, and what I want you to introduce me to." And they go, "Yeah, right," because they want to know what drives you, don't they? They want to know what you can offer and how important it is for you to under promise and over deliver.
Yes. Oh gosh. Yeah. Well, first of all, if you don't know how to do that before you become a parent, you learn very fast, because little disappointed eyes looking up at you is probably harder than any bad business conversation that you'll ever have in the entire world. So yes, under promise and over deliver. And you know what? That makes you an asset to everybody, because if you understand how to understand your capability, but dial it back a little bit so that you can promise something, even if it's only half of what you can deliver on, and then you over deliver on that. Every single person you work with, whether it's at a job or you're a business owner and you are performing a service for somebody, everyone's going to say, this guy goes above and beyond.
Mm.
So you're absolutely right, Joe. I mean, my gosh, if you can under promise and over deliver, that's probably one of the most valuable skills, other than learning how a business operates, whether you own one or work in one. Those are probably two of the most important things you can ever do for yourself.
Yeah. And talking about that and keeping on that subject matter, what's the one tip that you would give to either a guy, man or woman, who is leaving the military or has left the military and maybe he's on hard times, or left the military doing well and wants to get to the next level? What would the one tip be?
I don't care what stage you're at, build your network. If you're out of the military and you're on hard times, get off your butt and go to the VFW, go to the American Legion, go to whatever local veteran networking events are out there, so you at least have some commonality with people before you go and start talking to people that are going to make you feel uncomfortable. Yeah. Find some commonality and go out there and meet as many people as you can.
And to translate that into UK speak, go to there's lots of veterans organisations. There's veterans group. Armed Forces Breakfast Club is a good one and is around the UK. And I'm sure you have the same at your vets organisations as well, where you get to meet with guys and you know what, ask for help, because I've never met anyone, have I? Truthfully, if I've asked them for help, they've said no, maybe once or twice. But the majority of the times when I've said, "Can you help me?" they say, "How? What do you need, bud?"
Yeah. People want to help. And you know, that's one thing, especially people who have been in combat, is that we develop this cynical thought that people are out there to hurt us.
Mm.
And you know, it's just not true. There are people out there that are willing to hurt anybody.
Yeah.
But then there are so many more that just have the heart to serve. I would say the majority of the population are full of people that are willing to nurture rather than hurt you.
Yeah. And that's a good point, because you know there's way more good people in the world than there are bad. It's just that the bad people move around a lot and get in the news, so it seems there's a lot of them, but actually there's not.
Sure. But when you've been faced with somebody who will do those things, and if you've had to make that tough decision, which I'm not going to spell that out, but if you've had to make that tough decision at some point, and you know, I was just going to say, if you've ever had to deal with that, then you know, you have a very cynical way of looking at people, especially when you see the news. You're like, oh my gosh, I need to lock the doors. I need to put cameras up. I need to have a weapon in every room. And, you know, the list goes on and on and on and on and on, when in fact, the people that are that are having these things happen are probably in certain neighborhoods, like
Mm.
the one that I grew up with when I was younger,
Yeah.
grew up in when I was younger, or, it's random in these nicer neighborhoods. They're
Mm.
not targeting, if they are targeting a specific person, that's different. But if you don't make enemies, then you're not going to have to worry about that. Otherwise, it's just random.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So with regards to the skills we learned in the military, and we've already touched on it, but how transferable do you think they are? And let me give some values like discipline, diligence, dependability, all that sort of stuff, reliability, honesty. What's and the transferable skills that you get, how important do you think they are in Civvy Street?
They are extremely important. You know how many times I hear that I wish I could just get somebody who would show up for work.
Yeah,
Eh,
punctual,
That
yeah.
oh yeah. I mean, not even on time, just show up for work.
All
I
right,
mean,
okay.
all the time. And it's just so common. There are so many opportunities for people these days that they almost feel a sense of entitlement at work, which I don't want to be so cynical to say that they're trying to make things harder on these employers, but it seems like they're not taking it as seriously as they could. And when you talk to these employers, they'll keep anybody on staff because most people these days are short staffed. And
Mm,
so they deal with these problems and they just make sure that they always have people that they can call. But these skills that we have in the military are very important. We don't accept defeat. I mean, those are the warrior ethos, right? So the Army warrior ethos is I will always place the mission first. I will never accept defeat. I will never quit, and I will never leave a fallen comrade. Those four things, without all the other crap that we learn
yeah,
and is instilled up in here, if you think of that, my
yeah.
goodness, almost at every level in the civilian workforce, I think they would just appreciate that.
Mm, yeah, definitely. So as we're rounding up now, and I mean, I know we could carry on talking for
Sure.
days, dead easy. Um, what does the future hold for you now, and where are you going? Where do you want to go? What's your next mission?
So currently I have a business that I'm trying to do a couple of things with, right? So I have a new managers training that I do, and I can do that remotely, or I can travel to somebody's business if they're not too far away from me. But also, I do have a passion for veterans, so I'm working to build a few programs to help. I built a couple of them already, but even more to make
Yeah,
it robust to help them transition from service, from what they were doing to a new job, and not just a job, but filtering these companies that I'm going to partner with
yeah.
out to be ones that have a culture that a veteran can appreciate. And if they don't, then the money's not really what I'm looking for. I can go partner with somebody else. So that's really part of my bigger mission, but I'm expanding that past the veterans. And I'm doing transition coaching, and that's for people that are going from one job to another job. I'm teaching workshops to help them build their resume, to cater that resume to a specific job description with the cover letter. In addition to that, teaching them interviewing skills, because you don't just go there and wait for somebody to ask you questions. There you have to actually qualify that job as well.
Yeah.
Um, in addition to that, just making sure that there's a good coaching program for people that feel like they want that additional support through the time that they're applying for these jobs and going for these different, maybe changing a career or something like that, providing that one-on-one support, whether it's 1 month or 3 months or whatever the case may be.
Fantastic. So how can people get in touch with you?
Well, so my new website just went live this morning, and
Oh,
it is Victory.
congratulations.
Oh, thank you. No, but it's victoryleadershipcoaching.com. Otherwise, you can look me up on LinkedIn. I'm on Facebook. I'm really all over the web. And so if you go to your Google search and you type in hashtag, all one word, veteran leader trainer, you will find me. You probably see nothing but me for 3 or 4 pages.
Oh, that's brilliant. Listen, JJ Hardy, aka the coach, thank
The
you for
coach.
thank you for your service to the country. Thank you for your service on this podcast. Thank you very much for being you.
Thanks, Joe. Thanks for having me on.
That's brilliant. And listen, remember that you can find out about all the resources on joeteams.com. That's JOETEAMS.com. And you can find out as much as you want, loads of resources there for less than the price of 2 coffees per month. And yeah, remember, and until we meet again, have a brilliant day. Thank you.